in the heart of a sprawling African savanna, where the sun rose in golden splendor and set in fiery glory, lay a quaint village renowned for its rich culture and traditions called Panosi. This village was home to Olajumoke, a girl whose beauty was set to rival the stars in the sky. From a tender age, Olajumoke's parents would move cautionary tales about the spirits that roamed the world, spirits that could take on many forms or lure the unsuspecting into their traps. Her mother's voice was always filled with urgency and love, warning how to be cautious of the unknown. The villagers believed that these spirits could disguise themselves in any form to deceive and lure their victims, for not all that glittered was gold. Olajumoke would sit by the fire, wide-eyed, absorbing these stories. The crackling flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and her imagination ran wild with visions of spirits and creatures. As she grew older, these stories became a part of her, ingraining a deep-seated fear of the supernatural. Yet, as years passed, her fears were overshadowed by the attention she garnered for her exceptional beauty. Eyes that shines like a star, her radiant smile, and her kind heart made her the jewel of the village. As Olajumoke blossomed into a young woman, her beauty became the talk of neighboring villages. Suitors from far and wide journeyed to ask for her hand in marriage. They came bearing gifts of woven cloths, and cattle, each hoping to win her favor. Yet, Olajumoke had set her sights higher. She dreamed of a life filled with luxury and opulence, far beyond what her humble village could offer. Her parents, though loving, had instilled in her the belief that a suitable match should not only be kind and honorable but also wealthy enough to provide her every need. Yet, Olajumoke turned each of them away, believing they lacked the wealth and status which she desired for her future. One by one, she turned away the suitors, much to the dismay of her family and villagers. "She is kind but he's no wealthy," she would say. "This handsome, but his lands are barren." The tales of the spirits faded into the background as her desire for wealth took the forefront. Her parents were worried about how their daughter turned away suitors without a second thought of what they had to offer. But her dad stood by her, and by every decision she made. Her mother, on the other hand, would always advise her daughter to be very careful and thoughtful of every decision she made. Olajumoke heard whispers of a very wealthy man, who is strikingly handsome and young, crossing the narrow seas, visiting villages in search of a bride. He was last sighted in a nearby village. They said he had thousands of slaves at his whim, and has caskets filled with golden coins and assets. Olajumoke hopes he visits Panosi next. One fateful evening, a grand caravan approached the village unlike any seen before. The villagers gathered, murmuring in awe as the procession drew nearer. At its helm was a man named Olajumoke, who exuded an air of mystery and wealth. He was dressed in the finest silks, his fingers adorned with rings that glinted in the sunlight. His entourage included servants who escorted him, carrying chests filled with gold, jewels, and exotic spices. Olajumoke introduced himself as a wealthy merchant from distant land. His voice was smooth and his demeanor was captivating. He was welcomed by the chief of the community. The people of Panosi honored their guests with respect. He told the chief about his reason for traveling from village to village. The chief was happy to agree because it will be prosperous for the village. He was allowed to stay in the village for a week and was happy with the decision. He caught sight of the beautiful Olajumoke. Olajumoke, although flattered and entranced, didn't throw herself at him. She kept a strict face whenever he was around her and her friends. He spoke of cities built from stone, markets brimming with treasures, and ships that sailed to lands beyond the horizon. While all the other girls were giggling and laughing, she still didn't throw herself at him. But sooner than later he started becoming interesting to Olajumoke. He introduced himself as Olajumoke, a wealthy merchant from a distant land. Unlike the other suitors, Olajumoke's wealth and charm captivated Olajumoke. She found herself drawn to his enigmatic presence and grandeur, so she became entranced. Here was the man who could offer her the life she had always dreamed of. Her father learned of his motive and was alarmed. He immediately confronted Obafemi and told him to stay away from Olajumoke. He told him he could court as many girls as he wishes, but not Olajumoke. Determined and insistent, he liked Olajumoke. He vowed to marry her. Olajumoke's father told her to avoid Obafemi and that he's a stranger to the entire community, a stranger they know nothing about. Olajumoke became pale and stopped eating or drinking. Her friends were worried about her as she became used to Obafemi. She wouldn't talk to anyone until her father consoled her and decided to let her be with Obafemi. Days went by as Obafemi wasted no time in courting Olajumoke. He showered her with gifts more lavish than she had ever seen. He presented her with necklaces of pearls, silken gowns, and gold bracelets. Each gift was more extravagant than the last, and Olajumoke's heart would swell with the promise of a future filled with luxury. The villagers watched with a mixture of envy and concern. They whispered among them, remembering the cautionary tales of the old. "Remember the stories," they said. "Not everything that glitters is gold." But Olajumoke was blinded by the splendor before her. One night her mother sat her down in her room as Olajumoke was admiring one of the jewelries given to her by Obafemi. "Do you like him?" her mother asked with concern. "I love him very much, mother, because he cares about me and loves me too," Olajumoke replied. "You shouldn't worry about mother. He respects me and will take very good care of me," she added. "But he's too materialistic, and being materialistic is not good enough," her mother said. "Don't worry, mother, I'll be okay," she replied. "Be careful, my daughter," her mother said as she left the room with Olajumoke looking puzzled. The next day, Obafemi he gathered the villagers around, asked Olajumoke to wear his favorite color blue. At the middle of the villages, he sat Olajumoke and went down on one knee. He confessed his love to her in front of everyone and asked her to marry him. Without thought, Olajumoke agreed, eager to begin a new life far away from her humble village. The day of the wedding was a grand affair. The village gathered to celebrate, singing songs of joy and dancing late into the night. Obama's wealth was on full display. Olajumoke's mother, though hesitant, gave her blessing. "Remember, my daughter, be wary of suspicious things and take very good care of yourself, until I see you again." She bade her family farewell, her heart full of anticipation. When it was time to leave, Obafemi insisted that no family member should accompany them to their new home. This strange condition raised eyebrows, but Olajumoke was too enthralled to question it. She was questioning her decision and was worried she made the wrong choice. But she remained happy it turned out well. Olajumoke climbed into the grand chariot and sat beside Obafemi, who was sitting with pride and joy beside her. He had finally found a wife. Accompanied by a retinue of servants who wore his best color blue. As they traveled, the familiar landscape of her village began to fade. The open fields gave way to dense forests, and the sky darkened as if signaling an impending storm. Olajumoke felt lonely. "Why didn't you find a suitable wife in all the villages you visited?" Olajumoke asked. "None agreed to marry a stranger, because none of them knew me or my family background. But you married me even without knowing me, and I'll always love you," he replied. "Where's your family then?" Olajumoke asked, worried and alarmed. "Calm down, my wife will get there soon," he assured her. As the hours passed and unsettling silence fell over the group, Olajumoke began to notice that the servants were disappearing, one by one. First, the one tending to the horses vanished without a trace. Then the Myad beside her in the chariot was gone. Her heart pounded with fear, but Obafemi's calm with reassurances kept her from panicking. He promised that they will be nearing their destination soon, and she clung to that hope. The forest grew denser, the path narrower, and the air thick with an eerie stillness. Olajumoke's fear turned into a palpable dread. She clutched her silk gown, her mind racing with the stories from her childhood. She glanced at Obafemi, who seemed unfazed, his eyes fixed ahead. Suddenly, Obafemi halted the chariot. Dense forests surrounded them, and a cold wind whispered through the trees. It was then she realized no one else was left with them. "Why have you stopped, and why is everyone gone?" she asked, "They will soon be with you as my wife," he replied. Without a word, he began to undresses. She felt an absolute silence, and decided to turn over to check as Olajumoke's breath caught in her throat and his form shifted. His once handsome features twisted into something grotesque and sinister. The grand merchant was no more. Before her stood an evil spirit, its eyes glowing with malevolence. She screamed out loud, but no one could hear her. Realization dawned on Olajumoke and terror took hold. She had been deceived by a spirit, just as the tales had warned. The spirit left out a menacing laugh, its voice echoing through the forest. "You are mine now," the hiss, reaching out with clawed hand. In a surge of adrenaline, Olajumoke leaped out from the chariot and ran into the forest. Branches scratched at her skin, and her gown snagged on thorns. But she didn't stop. The spirit's laughter echoed behind her, urging her to run faster. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gaps. The forest seemed endless, each shadow a potential threat. Yet, the tales of her childhood, once a source of fear, now fueled her determination. She remembered her mother's voice, the warnings of deception, and she pushed herself harder. She stumbled over her roots, her body aching, but she refused to give up into the spirit's pursuit. After what felt like an eternity, Olajumoke saw the edge of the forest. The familiar sight of her village filled her with a renewing sense of hope. But a final burst of energy, she sprinted the last stretch and burst into the clearing, her village in sight. She collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing and trembling. The villagers gathered around, their faces edged with concern. Through her tears, Olajumoke recounted her harrowing ordeal. Her parents held her close, relief and soaring mingling in their eyes. The villagers nodded knowingly. "The spirits are cunning," they said. "But you have shown great courage and wisdom." They praised Olajumoke for her bravery, and the village celebrator has safe return with a feast, grateful that she had escaped the clutches of the evil spirit. Olajumoke's ordeal left an indelible mark on her. She realized the folly of her greed and the value of the wisdom imparted by her parents. No longer was she enamored by the false promises of wealth and luxury. She understood that true happiness and safety lay in the simple, honest life she has once taken for granted. From that day forward, Olajumoke's beauty was admired not for its physical allure, but the wisdom and strength she had embodied. Her tale was passed down through generations, a timeless reminder of the dangers of deception and importance of heeding the wisdom of one's elders. And so, in the heart of the African savanna, the story of Olajumoke and the deceptive spirit was once told and retold, a beacon of light and caution for all who heard it.